Today at 6, a warning to pregnant women to get COVID jabbed due to the high risk of serious illness if infected. One woman, unvaccinated and pregnant with twins, describes her hospital nightmare.
They were taking the decisions on my life, thinking that, okay, this woman might not gonna make it. I wouldn't want any woman to face what I faced.
Between July and September, 1 in 6 COVID patients needing the most critical care in England were unvaccinated pregnant women.
They're more likely to need intensive care. They're also more likely to give birth prematurely, and that has long-term effects for the baby.
Also on the programme, industry leaders tell ministers to stop sitting on their hands and find a solution to soaring energy costs.
There's talk. And the problem is to get action on the ground, which is what I've been trying to do for the last 40 years. Do it in a way that...
Prince Charles tells the BBC politicians must take bold action on climate change rather than just talk. And Captain Kirk, the actor William Shatner, explains why he'll soon be going into space to explore the final frontier.
And coming up on the BBC News channel, it's another night of World Cup qualifying as Wales continue their bid for a place in Qatar. They're in Tallinn to take on Estonia.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. The NHS is appealing to all pregnant women to get their coronavirus jabs. As new figures show, 1 in 6 of the most critically ill COVID patients is pregnant and unvaccinated. The Royal College of Midwives says pregnant women are at a greater risk of becoming severely ill from the virus. NHS England found that between July and September, out of 118 people who needed the most intensive kind of life support, 20 were pregnant women, with 19 unvaccinated. One had received a single dose of a COVID vaccine. With more details, here's our health editor, Hugh Pym.
We've been trying to have a baby for a long time now. I just can't believe we're still both here, to be honest, that it's not long now and he's going to be in the world.
Claire is reliving her COVID ordeal in July. Seriously ill when she was 26 weeks pregnant and then on a ventilator in intensive care for 12 days.
I thought I was going to die and I thought he was going to die, and we waited so long for this family that was the greatest fear, that my husband was going to lose us both.
Claire was about to book her first jab, but it was too late. She'd got the virus. Along with medical experts, she's appealing to all expectant mums to get vaccinated. Some said the guidelines earlier this year were confusing, but health leaders say COVID creates serious risks for pregnant women.
If they become unwell with COVID-19, they're more likely to need intensive care. They're also more likely to give birth prematurely, and that has long-term effects for the baby. They're unfortunately more likely to have a stillbirth and much more likely to have a caesarean section.
Here at Royal Papworth Hospital in Cambridge, there's a specialist unit using technology known as ECMO, in effect an artificial lung. Some women who've just had their babies have become so sick that they've had to be brought here to this unit for treatment, with the most intensive form of life support available for COVID-19 patients. Rachel is a consultant in intensive care. She's witnessed the heartache for mothers separated from their babies.
Okay, that's good progress.
I think it's devastating for the mother, for the family and for our staff, seeing women being separated from their babies for weeks, could be months. I often see tears in the unit from both sides.
Sultana was one of those mums. Her twins were delivered by emergency caesarean because she was so ill with COVID. She had to be transferred without them to intensive care at Royal Papworth.
While I was asleep, my twins were born. I had no idea. My babies are born. They are kept somewhere else. I am lying down somewhere else, deteriorating, and they were taking the decisions on my life, thinking that, okay, this woman might not gonna make it.
Sultana says she didn't get to hold her baby girls for weeks.
For 41 days, this will always be a gap in my life. My husband was taking care of them, changing their nappies. My sister was doing that. Why I was not doing that? That gap can never be filled. Regardlessly, I have the diaries, I have the photos. I was seeing them through the screen. So I wouldn't want any woman to face what I faced.
Why so excited today, huh?
These are happier times. She hadn't had a jab because she got ill in the early stages of the vaccine rollout. But her plea to all expectant mothers is to get vaccinated, as it can help families as well as protecting mums-to-be. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
And the Health Secretary Sajid Javid has written to secondary school students urging them to get jabbed. The government has pledged to offer vaccinations to all 12 to 15-year-olds before the half-term break this month, beginning on Friday. But so far in England, only 11% in that age group have been vaccinated. In Wales, the figure's 24%, and in Scotland, it's 36%. Northern Ireland hasn't begun vaccinations of this age group as yet. Here's our health correspondent, Dominic Hughes.
The decision to vaccinate all 12 to 15-year-olds was complicated. The health case was finely balanced, but other factors like the impact on education through missed school days meant the UK's chief medical officers decided it should go ahead. For this head teacher in Greater Manchester, it was the right decision, but not one he wants to force on parents.
We've made sure that we give all the information to the parents from the local authority. We've been very clear that we are not a vaccination centre. We haven't been effectively promoting vaccinations, and we've left it up to the parents and the pupil to make that decision.
Well, it's now 3 weeks since the launch of this vaccination programme for 12 to 15-year-olds, but there are some concerns that, in England at least, it's been a bit of a slow start. A number of factors have affected the rollout. Schools need to get parents to sign consent forms. Parents who are hesitant about vaccines need to have a discussion with a health professional to address their concerns. And while drop-in centres are used in Scotland, jabs in England are only delivered in schools. High infection rates among pupils have also delayed the process. You have to wait 28 days after testing positive before you have the vaccine. So far, vaccination rates in Scotland are much higher, perhaps reflecting that use of drop-in centres. The NHS in England says almost 200,000 children have already been jabbed, and experts believe the programme will make a difference.
Not only does this vaccine help to prevent severe disease and hospitalizations and, of course, deaths, but it also helps to reduce transmission. So if we have 12 to 15-year-olds vaccinated, they're not only less likely to be sick, but they're also much less likely to give this virus to someone else.
And the parents we met in Altrincham were happy to give their consent.
They need to be secured as well.
That's good for their education too, to stop them
That's correct, yeah. Stop spreading the virus, definitely in the class, because there is many students in there. So why not?
We just looked at both the positive and negative side of the vaccinations, and we decided in terms of avoiding the risk for this COVID, we'd like to take Pfizer for my son, actually.
There are some concerns that after a good start, the vaccination programme across the UK has stalled, at least compared to other European nations. The progress of this latest rollout will be an important test. Dominic Hughes, BBC News, Altrincham.
Anyone in Wales wanting to visit nightclubs or large events will, from today, need to prove they've had 2 doses of a COVID vaccine or produce a negative lateral flow test. The Welsh Government says it hopes the rules will ease pressure on the NHS this winter. Howell Griffith reports now from Cardiff.
Here's the ticket,
and your COVID passes.
Produce your pass, pick out your paperwork.
I need to see lateral flow first, please.
Or proof of a negative test. There's no way into this concert without one.
I don't see any issue with it at all, to be honest. It's very straightforward and, yeah, no problem at all.
They kept rejecting my identity, so I've done a lateral flow test instead.
COVID passes have already been used at some festivals, but ahead of this gig, not everyone got the message.
It's a small venue, we're wearing masks, and yet, they won't let us come in.
So how do you get your hands on one? Stephen is a double-jabbed student in Swansea.
So it's asking me to record a short video.
Got a video?
Of my face while I tell, you tell it 4 numbers. So 2, 1, 7, 6.
After all that, it arrived. Stephen wouldn't mind the pass becoming permanent.
So I'm happy to continue this now, like forever. It's just, if that's what it takes, it's like a new thing. If that's what it takes now, it's just a new normal. If that's what we do for the rest of our lives, then it is what it is.
But research suggests around a third of people are opposed to the idea of having to show a pass.
For some people, mandation could be counterproductive, I think. And, we do see this, that some people will say, well, actually now I really don't want to get it. And there have been criticisms that maybe the system is open to gaming or to people putting in fake COVID negative tests.
There's a £60 fine for faking a test, but it depends on people reporting their own result.
The point of the fine is mostly to be a deterrent to somebody.
But who's going to police it?
Well, the policing of it can be done through the checking system that we have, but it's not the point of it. The point of the system is to keep you safe and other people safe.
Having a pass isn't the same as not having the virus, but from today these students will need one for a night out.
Your COVID pass yet?
No, I have not, sorry.
Do you know about the scheme? Do you know what you have to do?
I found out a few hours ago.
Soon, passes may not just be for entry to clubs, concerts and stadiums. The Welsh Government says it could add care homes and hospitals to the list if COVID cases rise. Howell Griffith, BBC News.
The government's latest coronavirus figures for the UK show there were 40,224 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period. That means, on average, there were nearly 38,000 new cases per day in the last week. As of Friday, there were more than 6,500 people in hospital with coronavirus. Another 28 deaths have been recorded. That's of people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID test result, which means on average there were 111 deaths per day in the past week. On vaccinations, 85.5% of the population aged 12 and over have had their first dose of a vaccine, and 78.6% have been double jabbed. Now, the Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng has now made a formal request to the Chancellor to support industries affected by soaring energy prices. Yesterday, Treasury officials accused him of making up claims he'd already discussed the issue with them. The steel industry has asked ministers to stop sitting on their hands and come up with a swift solution. Here's Coletta Smith.
Welcome to Europe's biggest bottling plant. They make 5 million bottles a day here. And these furnaces have to get up to 1,600 degrees Celsius. It's incredibly hot in here. And it's all powered by gas.
It's extraordinary times. We haven't seen anything like this since we started in business.
At the moment, domestic customers are partly shielded from the current price spike because of the price cap and fixed deals. But big companies like this one are feeling the heat right now. They're charged a new rate for gas each day, reflecting the global market. So the price they're having to pay to run this place feels nearly as high as the temperature.
We have little option but to pass those prices on to our customers, who will, in theory, pass them on to retail and consumers. And that should be a big concern, I guess, for government and for all of us.
We're only a couple of miles down the road, but this is where we'll all feel the impact, because products made using that expensive gas will be hitting the shelves within the next couple of weeks, and we will all be having to pay more as a result. So should the government step in to help big business?
What about all companies, you know what I mean? Even the small independent shops and hairdressers and, all companies, they're desperate. But what about sort of the families on the street as well? Why should it just be companies? It's just something about their prices needs addressing, full stop, really.
If the government's going to pay their gas bills, then they should own the company. Then why should British taxpayer pay?
Things are going up all the time. Things which were
20p last week and now 29p and 39p. So things, I think everything's going to go up.
A few weeks ago, the government decided they would step in and pay the gas bill for CF Industries so they could keep making carbon dioxide. That funding's come to an end, and today we've heard a deal's been reached for food companies to just pay more for the carbon dioxide they buy. But with gas prices staying high, other industries are now demanding the same treatment. Either the government foots the bill or customers will be paying more at the tills. Galetta Smith, BBC News in Frodsham.
Well, our political correspondent Nick Eardley is at Westminster. Nick, there was confusion over what the business secretary claimed the Treasury was doing to help businesses in all of this. Is that now cleared up?
Well, despite the warnings, Clive, about how serious this situation could be for some businesses and for jobs around the country, we've had this pretty remarkable public spat between the Treasury and the Business Department. Yesterday, the Business Secretary told the BBC that he was in talks with the Chancellor about trying to find solutions, but a Treasury source said that was a mistake. The Treasury nor the Chancellor weren't involved in this process at all. And with the Prime Minister on holiday, it was left to his spokesman to pick up the pieces and say, of course, ministers are working across departments to try and come up with a solution. Now, this evening we do have a bit clarity on what's going on behind closed doors. The Business Secretary has made a formal application to the Treasury for help for these high energy intensity companies over the next few weeks and months. There is some reluctance in government to prop up some companies that are otherwise profitable in the long term, so I think that if there is any support, it will be targeted and temporary. But it's worth remembering that the last 36 hours have shown us the two departments leading this charge, the relations between them are far from rosy.
OK, Nick, thank you for that. Nick Eardley there, live at Westminster. It is 16 minutes past 6, our top story this evening. A warning to pregnant women to get COVID jabbed, as between July and September, 1 in 6 COVID patients needing the most critical care in England were unvaccinated pregnant women. And coming up, dozens of people have been arrested in dawn raids after a police operation to smash an organised crime ring, making fake passports for criminals.
Coming up in Sports Day on the BBC News channel, England's Marcus Rashford talks to us about the support he's received since he missed this penalty at the Euros and the subsequent abuse he suffered.
Prince Charles has told the BBC that world leaders gathering at the UN Climate Change Conference in Glasgow next month must take bold action on global warming rather than just talk. In a wide-ranging interview, the Prince of Wales also said he understands why climate change activists take to the streets, but that actions like blocking roads aren't helpful. He's been speaking to our climate editor, Justin Rollout, in the gardens of his Balmoral estate.
Lovely to see you. Great to see you.
Made it. This was a rather empty field that the farm didn't need anymore. So I thought, And the great thing was I managed to plant it at the same year that my grandson was born, the eldest, George.
It's a legacy and inheritance for your grandchildren. How worried are you about the state of that inheritance?
Deeply worried. I've always felt that we're somehow trained to believe that nature is a separate thing from us and we can just exploit and control and suppress everything about her without suffering the consequences.
The narrative has changed. You know, lots of the things that you said are now mainstream.
It's taken far too long.
World leaders are gathering in Glasgow to talk about the kind of issues that you were...
Yeah, but they just talk. And the problem is to get action on the ground, which is what I've been trying to do for the last 40 years.
What about the people who protest? What about kind of Extinction Rebellion? Do you understand why they go out
Of course
and
I
disrupt
do.
the streets?
Yes, but it isn't helpful, I don't think, to do it in a way that alienates people. So I totally understand the frustration. The difficulty is how do you direct that frustration in a way that is more constructive rather than destructive. So people should really notice how despairing so many young are.
Is our government doing enough to make these things happen?
I couldn't possibly comment.
It's true to say that you've got a pretty hefty carbon footprint. It must take a lot of gas to heat a palace.
Yes, but I have tried for a very long time to make sure that the heating is done in a way that is as sustainable as possible. So I've got electric cars, like my old Aston Martin, which I've had for 51 years, runs on, can you believe this, surplus English white wine. And whey from the cheese process.
So what would you say to people watching this in terms of diet? Should they be eating less meat?
For years, I haven't eaten meat and fish on 2 days a week. And I don't eat dairy products on 1 day a week.
It's an autumn garden, isn't it?
It's really for autumn colour and a bit of spring. A lot of parts of Britain are just prairie farms, avenues, because one of the things I've been wanting to do...
Avenues of trees?
Yes, I've been wanting to help plant avenues of trees which could commemorate all the people who've died during this pandemic. In fact, there was a wonderful example in Australia after the First World War when they planted avenues of trees to commemorate all the people who died. When you think what a difference, urban trees make. And they're wonderful in the landscape as well.
Prince Charles talking to our climate editor, Justin Rowland. The family of a healthcare worker who died after the Manchester Arena bombing have criticised some emergency services, saying they made mistake after mistake. The inquiry into the bombing has heard John Atkinson might have survived if he'd been treated more quickly. Today, his family refused to accept an apology from the ambulance service's operational commander on the night. Mr. Atkinson suffered a fatal cardiac arrest more than an hour after the blast in 2017. With more details, here's Judith Moritz.
John Atkinson was badly hurt in the bombing at Manchester Arena, but it was nearly an hour before he got professional medical help. Ambulances raced to the scene, but most paramedics stayed outside the building, and it was decided that casualties should be lifted downstairs to the station next door for treatment. But there were no stretchers, and John Atkinson was dragged along this bridge on a display board which broke. A police officer asked for help, but the paramedic in command said he should be left where he was, and last week apologised to Mr. Atkinson's family.
All the paramedics, all the emergency responders that went to that scene wanted to do their very best, and I am truly sorry if any decision that I made, any decision, impacted on his survivability.
John Atkinson's father, his mother and sisters have listened to days of heartbreaking evidence and say they believe mistake after mistake was made in his case.
This should never have been allowed to happen. John had so much more to give. We heard the apology last week from Mr. Smith from the North West Ambulance Service. We cannot accept this apology. Actions speak louder than words, and we want to see what actions are taken to ensure that this never happens again.
In stark contrast to their anger at the emergency services, John Atkinson's family have called the member of the public who stayed with John for an hour a hero, saying that the kindness of strangers has offered them a glimmer of hope in their darkest moments. John Atkinson had a caring nature. He worked with autistic children. His family say his death has left a massive void and raises so many questions which need to be answered. Judith Moritz, BBC News, Manchester.
The Metropolitan Police has decided not to take any further action against the Duke of York following a review into sexual assault allegations against him. An American woman, Virginia Giuffre, is suing Prince Andrew in America, claiming she was assaulted when she was a teenager. He's consistently denied any wrongdoing. Well, our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell is here. So, Nick, where does this leave the Prince?
Virginia Giuffre was not interviewed by the Metropolitan Police as part of this inquiry. They last spoke to her some years ago, as I understand it. This was a paper-based review, at the end of which the Metropolitan Police has decided not to take it any further. Now, one must assume that that is a matter of relief to Prince Andrew, but of course this matter is not over. The civil lawsuit in New York continues, and having for months appeared to want to try to ignore it in the hope, presumably, that it would go away, Andrew and his lawyers have clearly changed their tactics. They've now appointed lawyers in the United States to represent him in the civil lawsuit. But, you know, here's the thing that I think will be occupying the thinking of other members of the royal family and royal officials. We are now less than 4 months from the start of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, when she will mark, and many people in this country will want to celebrate her 70 years on the throne. there is no doubt that the family will hope that he can establish his innocence. He has repeatedly said that there has been no impropriety, but there are real reputational issues here, as other members of the royal family must realise. Will we see Andrew again in public? Will we see him, for example, riding as part of the Jubilee, trooping the colour as Colonel-in-Chief of the Grenadier Guards? Well, I wonder.
OK, Nick, many thanks. Nick Witchell there. A coroner has concluded that Warwick University missed opportunities to engage with a student who disengaged from his course and took his own life. William Bargate, who was in his second year, was found dead near his family home last October. The inquest heard that a referral to the university's wellbeing service wasn't triggered, despite the student's failure to submit coursework, attend exams and respond to university emails. Dozens of men have been arrested after a police operation to smash an organised crime ring, supplying fraudulent passports to criminals. Officers from the National Crime Agency raided homes across the UK in the early hours following a Europe-wide investigation. Our Home Affairs correspondent Tom Simons has the details.
It's 5 a.m. and quietly, at least at first, the National Crime Agency moves in for the climax of an investigation which has taken years. The target, a gang which allegedly supplied bespoke passports for serious criminals. The National Crime Agency believes that this is a criminal group providing a genuinely important service to other suspected criminal groups, providing them with fraudulently obtained but genuine passports, not forged, and that means they're extremely valuable in international crime. According to the NCA, the gang would obtain passports for specific criminal clients by finding someone with an existing passport who looked like them and paying this person to apply for a replacement. When the application was sent in, the client's picture was sent rather than that of the original passport holder, allowing the client to travel using a false identity.
We have a lot of criminal groups out there, all of whom were looking for this service. We worked with our colleagues in the Passport Office to, first of all, close that gap, but also to exploit it so that we could identify those individuals who were applying for the passports.
The National Crime Agency says it allowed them to track down criminals like Jamie Acourt, currently serving 9 years for drug offences. He was also a suspect in the Stephen Lawrence murder. More than 100 people allegedly using the passports have been arrested for serious crimes. And the way the Passport Office handles applications for replacements has been tightened up. Tom Simons, BBC News, South London.
His character explored space, the final frontier, but now William Shatner, who played Captain Kirk in the cult 60s television series Star Trek, will finally make his own journey. He'll be on board the spacecraft developed by the multi-billionaire founder of Amazon, Jeff Bezos, and at 90 he'll become the oldest person to ever travel to the edge of space. Our correspondent Sophie Long has more from Texas.
As cool and calm as Captain James T. Kirk. For decades, he played a character synonymous with space exploration. Now, at 90 years of age, he's preparing to boldly go where no living sci-fi star has gone before, proving you're never too old to really be who you want to be.
What a thing to have. He's the oldest guy that went into space. I want to have the vision. I want to see space. I want to see the Earth. I want to see what we need to do to save Earth. I want to have a perspective that hasn't been shown to me before.
And you're going to hear the engine cut off. His highly anticipated blast-off has reignited interest in both the Star Trek
Did exactly what I would have done.
and Blue Origin brands, taking the world of PR to a stratospheric level.
Now, fire blind, lay down a panic.
This second Blue Origin passenger flight comes after employees claimed the company had a toxic environment and failed to adhere to proper safety protocols, accusations it denies.
That just hasn't been my experience at Blue. We're exceedingly thorough. I've worked on New Shepard for 8 years now in a variety of roles, and I can't say enough about the team of professionals that work on this program from the earliest days up through now as we've started our human flights, and safety has always been our top priority.
Rocket man, burning out his fuse.
is our hero.
There's debate over whether they'll return to Earth astronauts, but as Shatner said, he will be a real rocket man. He'll experience weightlessness during a journey that should last less than 11 minutes. The billionaires leading this space race say it's more than a rocket-fueled ego trip. They claim it could help us all to live long and prosper. Sophie Long, BBC News, West Texas.
Time for a look at all the weather news now, and Matt Taylor is here in the studio. It's a pleasure to have you, sir.
Lovely to be back. It's been a while. And I don't bring you the final frontier, but the glorious view of aurora from earlier in the month across Scotland, and there's a chance that a few could see that repeated again tonight. Now, I say a few because the big spoiler in this story is cloud. It's running around this area of high pressure, which is going to bring us a lot of dry weather over the coming days. But that cloud just toppling around the eastern edge has been bringing quite a bit of rain across Scotland today, and it'll extend it further southward tonight, blotting out any view of that aurora for many. Best chance probably across the far northeast of Scotland. There will be some clear skies further south, but here quite a chilly night once again. Last night we saw temperatures down to around 2 or 3 degrees. Similar sort of story tonight. Much milder elsewhere though, with that cloud in place. Does mean tomorrow a lot more clouds, generally speaking. Some sunshine, Orkney, Shetland, some sunny conditions at times in the south, but even here a bit more cloud than we saw through today. Reasonably mild though, even with a few cloud breaks developing, especially in the west. But in eastern parts of Scotland, eastern England, a bit of a chill tomorrow. They're on the eastern side of a weather front, and that means temperatures only around 10 to 12 degrees. But a change on the way for there. It's just a temporary blip, because temperatures are back up by the time we hit Wednesday. And that's because the area of high pressure that's with us slips a bit further southwards, allows Atlantic winds to push back in off the west, chasing away that weather front back into the North Sea. Early rain admittedly on Wednesday in Orkney and Shetland, and a few splashes down eastern coast, but otherwise a dry and bright day for many. A bit more sunshine around once again compared with Tuesday, and as I said, eastern areas a little bit milder, and across the board temperatures around 2 or 3 degrees above average for the time of the year. But cold air will make a bit more of a dominant surge as we go towards the end of the week. Comes behind this active weather front on Thursday, heavy rain across Scotland, and then developing northerly winds. Temperatures in Dundee, for instance, as we see the week out, only around 10 degrees, and by this weekend just 14 in Norwich. But as I said, most will be dry. Clive.
OK, Matt, many thanks. Matt Taylor there in the studio. And that's it. So, goodbye from me. Now on BBC One, let's join our news teams where you are. Have a very good evening.